I think we all make ourselves feel so guilty when we don't finish something, but maybe the reason you're not finishing it is that it has a greater purpose later on down the line. Are you like most crafters and have a haunting pile of UFOs that has been lost to time that every time you think of makes you feel guilty? I used to feel that way too until I had a time in my life when all of those UFOs and works in progress really saved my sanity. So I have a little bit of a story for you today that hopefully can help you look at your UFOs and WIPs in a slightly more positive light. Hello, welcome to Show and Tell Meg. I'm Megan and I like to make things. And I have always liked to make things. I've gone through so many different phases of the things that I liked to make, but regardless of what that was manifesting itself as in my life, I have always had this urge to create things. About 5 years ago now, I got divorced, and the process of that and the process leading up to that really took a mental toll on me. I was very high anxiety. I was very depressed, as I'm sure most people can understand in such a situation. But I had had quite a few years leading up to that of really, really stressful situations in my life. And so I hit this wall when I found out I was getting divorced and I was in that process. I suddenly had no mental capacity to plan projects anymore. And as a person who looks at project planning as almost a separate hobby from actually making things, I am always planning things and have just a list of all the things that I want to make that are waiting in the wings, waiting for me to have the time to do it. And so it was really strange for me to suddenly come on this time when I just could not put two and two together. I could not pick a pattern and find the yarn and put everything together. I just did not have the mental space to do that. And so in this time, I leaned really hard on my UFO pile. If you are new to knitting and crafting, UFOs are unfinished objects. We all end up with them. We all start projects with the best of intentions. We love the yarn, we love the item, we have something that pulls us together that makes us want to make that item. And then over time, something happens. You start to make it, and maybe the yarn is difficult to work with. Maybe you picked the wrong size. Maybe you're missing a piece of something, some kind of notion or something like that. There are so many different reasons that we just lose interest in some way in some of our projects, and they sit to the side. Sometimes they end up in a box or a corner or a cubby or a bag, and we forget about them until maybe we're cleaning out that section of our room and we find them, and then suddenly the guilt sets in. And I used to feel like that really badly. I have knitted for 12 years, and so I feel pretty proud of the fact that I don't have a ton of things that I started and didn't finish. I do have plenty of things I planned and never started, but as far as things that were in the works that I did not finish, I don't have very many anymore. But there was a time when I did. And when I was getting divorced, I reached for that box, and suddenly I had all of these different projects at my disposal that I could just work on, because making things is extremely beneficial to your mental health. There are lots of studies about this, of people who can say it much more articulately than me. But the best way that I can describe it is when everything is falling down in your life and there are huge things that you can't control, it's nice to grab one thing that you can control everything about. And I chose to do that with knitting and crocheting. I went through years and years of times where I had no stability in a lot of aspects of my life, but I could make a cute stuffed animal, and everyone I show it to thought it was cute. And it just brought a little bit of joy into my life just with this cute object that I knew I made. I did everything about it. I picked all the aspects of it, and my skills produced it. And it really gives you an awesome mental boost. So I knew that that was something I needed to continue to do while I was getting divorced. And my works in progress and UFOs enabled me to do that. So I thought that I would show you kind of the progression over that time period of the things that I made, what these UFOs were, why they were UFOs, and then how I ended up finishing them. So we will start with one that I felt really the most guilty about. So back in 2018, I was approached by lovecrafts.com, and they offered to give me some yarn in exchange for a blog post. I mentioned it on here before, but I was a sewing and knitting blogger before I was ever on YouTube. I did it for years and years, back in the heyday of blogs. And I was honored that they wanted to promote this particular yarn, and they chose me to do it. And so they offered me this yarn. I could pick any project I wanted. They sent me the quantity that I said I needed, and I started to work on it. And then things in my life just got so hectic and crazy. And also, it was kind of a project that I was not super excited about once I started going on it. And so it was just kind of a perfect storm, and it got set to the wayside. And that is the Dollia cardigan. So this was from Interweave Knits magazine, fall 2011. And I saw it when I was a brand new knitter, and I fell in love with this lace design on the back. I still absolutely love this lace design. And when Lovecrafts asked me to make something with their Millimia naturally soft cotton, it's a fingering weight. I picked this. This is the flamingo colorway. It's a fingering weight cotton, very soft. This was really nice to work with. Like, everything about the yarn was lovely. But I should have paid attention more to my own personal style. And this is one of those drape front cardigans. Let me put it on so that you can see what I'm talking about. So this is a drape front cardigan, which, if you can see, this is the front, and it just hangs. It's very art teacher vibes. You know, we were all wearing these with this large drape in the 2000 aughts, right? They became very much a thing. And I never really cared for that style on me, but I was trying to be experimental. I had been making pretty much all the same types of sweaters. I fell in love with Andy Satterlund patterns, and I was just making vintage inspired cardigans. And so I really wanted to step outside the box. And I knew I had loved that lace design all those years ago. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to give it a try. And even looking at it now, I'm just like, oh, I didn't pay attention to the way that it was constructed before I decided I wanted to make this. And so not only is it the drape front, which isn't exactly my thing, it's also a shawl collar. The collar itself, it's hard to see, but this side is knits, this is pearls. So you switch which direction is the front and the back because you want this part to fold over like this. And so it really needs a slightly more structured yarn to do that than this soft cotton. And so that just kind of rolls up and looks awkward. I can never get it to sit correctly. But the worst thing on me is I have very narrow shoulders, and I feel like this makes me look so wide. If you see there, I don't do drop shoulder items because I think it just makes me look kind of hunched and wide. That's just my opinion. I'm not searching for compliments or anything by sharing that, but therefore I don't feel super confident when I wear anything that accentuates that. And because of this drape going on, it pulls down on my shoulders, and so it pulls the armpit out, and I think it just makes me look more broad. So even though I loved this design, I got into all this stockinette in this really fine cotton, and I knew I already wasn't super incredibly excited about the cardigan anymore. And when things in my life got crazy, I just set this aside. And I felt so bad because they had given me this yarn under the pretext that I would post something about it. And, you know, life happens, and I still love crafts. If you watch this, I am still so sorry that it took me so long to finish this object. But I started this May 23rd of 2018. And when I started going through my divorce, this was the project that I grabbed. Not only because I knew it would alleviate the guilt of not finishing it, but also I needed something mindless to work on. I didn't want to have any kind of complicated cables or lace or anything like that. I just stockinette, miles and miles of stockinette was exactly what I needed. And so this project really provided that. And I did end up finishing it. I didn't love it at the time, and I still don't love it. And that's a real shame. But for my purposes, for what I needed this for at the time in 2019, I finished it August 4th of 2019, and it absolutely fit the bill. It gave me something to work on that I didn't have to think about. I could watch movies and knit, and I ended up with a finished object, so I got that feeling of a boost. And it didn't even matter that I didn't love it. It was more the actual act of making something and having something to show for my time and getting that guilt of disappointing the yarn company off of my back. This really did all of those things. And so I still, every time I look at this in my drawer, I'll put it on. I'll think, yeah, I'm going to wear that. I put it on and I'm like, yeah, I just don't love it. And so I still contemplate taking this apart, saving that lace back and making some other kind of cardigan, one that's more of a style that I know I would wear, because the back is beautiful. I would love to actually get to wear it. So that might happen in the future. But until then, I know that this cardigan absolutely saved my sanity at the time, even though I didn't end up with something that I really ever wanted to wear. The next project that I worked on was kind of an interesting one that I also felt really guilty, and it was taking up so much space in my house. So I am an avid thrifter. I have thrifted particularly for craft supplies for over a decade. And there was this one particular thrift store near my house that got all kinds of different craft projects and craft supplies donated. And so when I saw this one, I had great hopes for it at the time. I think I bought this in about 2014, and it was an unfinished blanket project. So some lovely, probably lady, had spent her time knitting this really nice lace design, and it was in a really large bag like this, partially finished, with all the yarn needed to make it. I think it came with 3 or 4 of the Caron 1-pound acrylics in this navy blue color, and it had the needles to make it with, and they were still on the project. Like somebody, maybe they had passed away, is kind of what I'm imagining, and then their family just donated the entire project. So I bought this for $2. This lovely blanket that needed to be finished, thinking, yeah, I will make this project worth it for this person. I will put the time in and I will finish it. And then it just sat in my house, and it moved houses with me, and it still never got done. And so once I finished the Dollia cardigan, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to finally finish that blanket. And so I pulled everything out. It had everything you needed except the pattern that was used. And oh, the irony. I was at the point that I could have followed the pattern had I had one, but I was not at the point that I could look at this and generate the pattern from it. I think I could probably manage it now, but back then there was just no way that was going to happen. So with this large, but not too large section of blanket, I finally planned to just do a moss stitch border. So I finished off the edge with a moss stitch and called it good. And so it's a little too big for me to really show you the size of it. I will put pictures up over here of what it looked like. And it's kind of the perfect wrap up type blanket. It reminds me of the size of those faux comforters that are folded, that look like they're folded at the bottom of a hotel bed. It's about that width. I want to say it was like 3 feet wide. Yeah, I think it's like 3 feet wide, and it was long enough to drape across my California King bed at the time. So it's a decent length. It's just an awkward, long rectangle kind of shape, but I finished it. I was thrilled that I got this out of my stash. It didn't have to take up space anymore. I didn't feel guilty every time I saw that bag sitting in the corner of my room. And I have kind of a couch blanket for when it's not super cold. You know, you can just throw it on and you're not going to die of heat stroke because of all the lace in it. And it's a pretty object. And so I'm just glad that I was able to make someone else's and my work and time into something that was valuable. So this one definitely helped me out. I think it only took me a day to finish that moss stitch border, which is really sad considering how many years I had it. But I'm glad that it finally got finished. And so this was a very nice boost at the time. After that blanket was done, I reached for one of my other oldest works in progress, which was the Lady Russell shawl. So this was from Jane Austen Knits. It was from the fall 2012 issue of Jane Austen Knits. And if you're a fan of Jane Austen, Lady Russell is a character in Persuasion, which I love Persuasion. She's not necessarily my favorite character. She causes a lot of problems, but I think that this was well named. This was so much more of an undertaking than I knew I was taking on when I started it. So I officially started this project in May of 2016, and I started it specifically to use a yarn that I had reclaimed from a thrifted sweater. I bought a 100% cashmere Ralph Lauren sweater at a thrift store for $3, and I just decided I wanted to learn how to unravel sweaters, and I did. And so I had a sweater quantity of this just buttery soft 100% cashmere yarn. It did separate, and I didn't know anything about spinning and plying, but it was a several plied yarn that when I unraveled it, the plies came apart, and I just unraveled it that way. So I have this basically lace weight cashmere yarn, lots of it. And so I decided to make this shawl because it was pretty big and it said it would take a lot of yardage. But this yarn was so soft. Just even tensioning the yarn, because it's only one ply, I'm basically knitting this with singles. And singles in cashmere, if you've ever spun, you'll know what I'm talking about. It just, any form of tension whatsoever, it would break. So there are a lot of places that I had to stop and join in again and then weave in the ends. And so it just became such a headache. And I also, at the time, I was messing up the lace pattern. I think I even had to go back when I first picked this up in 2019 to finish, but I was just determined. And since it was already going, I wanted to feel that, aha, I finished it. And I did. So I worked on this all summer in 2019, and I finally finished it in August. And it's even got these long drapes. I'll put a picture of it over here that I took at the time. But this was absolutely an exercise in devotion and stick-to-itiveness because it was really kind of annoying to work on. And that's why it was in my UFO pile for so many years. But now that it's done, I absolutely adore this. I use this fairly frequently. I keep it in a certain bag and I take it with me when I go out, but it's just so soft. It matches everything because it's an undyed cashmere, but it might have been a pain in the butt to work on, but now that it's done, this is absolutely one of my favorite shawls that I've ever made. So I wrap all of that into this every time I look at it. I think of how annoying it was to first make and how I still pushed through and made it anyway. And so all of those things, all of those emotions are wrapped up in this every time I use it. And so it's just a really nice reminder that I stuck with it, I finished it, and now I have something beautiful to show for my time. So this one is one of my favorite things that I made in this time. After I finished that one, I wanted to use a yarn that I felt guilty about. I have a lot of stash yarn. I don't know if you know this yet, but I had purchased this particular yarn. This is Fiber Spates Vivacious DK. I got it secondhand from Emma Welford, who's a knitwear designer, and she used to do D-stashes that were just epic. She would sell the finished objects from some of the patterns that she designed. I bought some of those as well, and she would sell really nice yarn for an absolute bargain of a price, and this was one of them. And it was just this amazing, bright, happy, sunny yellow color that I just needed in my life. And it was a steal of a deal. So I got 3 skeins of this, which I knew wasn't very much. And that's why I hadn't made anything out of it yet. But I knew the Dollia cardigan could possibly work. And so I just decided I was going to do it, and I did it. It ended up not being quite enough. I will show a picture of me wearing it here. It is kind of an awkward fit. I didn't have enough to make the sleeves. I pieced absolutely every possible shred of this yarn. Inside this ribbing, there are so many ends that I wove in just to try to make these things work on these sleeves. And in the end, the sleeves still look really awkward because this pattern wasn't designed to be a short cap sleeve like that. It's designed to taper down. And so it just did not have enough taper at the top for how I ended up making it. So I've really never been incredibly happy with the way that it fits, but I still absolutely love this yarn. Like, it was absolutely a fantastic project for that time, because how could you not be happy working with this bright sunshine yarn, right? So it didn't end up exactly like I wanted, but I finished it. I also even backed the button bands. Like, I did everything the right way, and it still didn't work out exactly, but I had something to work on, and it was something pretty and a bright, fun color. So it absolutely boosted my mood. I still appreciate this project to this day because of that, even though I don't really wear it very much. And maybe I will take this apart and redo it one day to fit me better now that I know better. But in the meantime, I'm still happy that I finished this project. After that, I was on a big time yellow kick, and I had this beautiful Cascade Eco Plus yarn in the butternut squash colorway, and I really wanted to use it. It was another stash bust that I had had for a long time and felt kind of guilty about. It was also really bulky, so it took up a lot of room in my stash. I decided to make Kate Davies' Owls sweater, and I didn't have enough yarn to do her Owl Again pattern. She does this as both a pullover sweater and as an actual cardigan, but her cardigan was very oversized, in my opinion, like for my taste. And so I chose to actually knit this as a pullover and then steek the front. So this was my first time using steeking. I didn't even add any extra to the center. I just knew that I was going to make a really wide button band, and the steeking has held up great. Everything about this was a joy to work on. It took me like a month, but I love the owls and the cables. I did give just one of the owls little eyes, and this is one of my absolute favorite sweaters to wear when it's really cold, which it doesn't get super cold here for very long. But every year when it does now, I do pull this out. This I was super proud of. It was a very easy project to do, but I was proud to use the yarn up, thrilled with how it came out, thrilled that I tried something new with the steeking. And yeah, so this one definitely ticked all the boxes. After the success with the Owl Again, I turned to another Andy Satterlund pattern, because again, I just know how to make her patterns fit me. And so it was very mindless to just grab yarn out of my stash and make one up, because I knew it was going to work out, right? So this is the Hortensia Cardigan, and I know it's really hard for you to see me holding it up right here, so I'm going to put a picture of me wearing it at the time right here. And this is another really old stash bust. I used Cascade Avalon, which is a 50-50 cotton acrylic blend. This was one that I bought this yarn as black. It's the Pirate Black colorway, and it looked black on my computer screen, but when it arrived, it was clearly this gray color. So apparently pirates don't like real black, I guess. And so I was really disappointed with the yarn when I got it. And I always felt guilty because, well, I spent this money on this yarn and I don't have anything to show for it, but I don't love the color. And once I made it into this sweater, I wore this all the time. To this day, I still wear it a lot, because even though it's like a DK or a worsted weight, it's cotton. And so it's not crazy heavy. It's not crazy hot. And I'm able to wear this at work in the summer in the air conditioning. So this one turned out to be a real win, even though I wasn't super sure about it at the time. And I was mostly just trying to use this yarn up, but it turned out to be a great one. So I'm very glad that I made this as well. So after all of my successes with pulling out these really old works in progress and just getting them done, I decided to pull out some things that I had made years before and give them a purpose at long last. I did give this as a gift to someone, so I no longer have it, but I have a picture of it. I decided back in spring of 2015 that I was going to join the Geek Along, which, if you're not familiar with that, it was a project done by Lattes and Llamas. They're a brand. They do patterns. It's two sisters, and they would do all kinds of different patterns. But every year they did a geek along blanket, and they would give these squares that could be done in double knitting or in tapestry crochet. And it was just color work charts, and they were all themed. So one year they did like superheroes and video games and things like that. The year that I wanted to make, they were doing what they called the Mad Scientist blanket. And so all of the different squares were themed with different scientists. I loved the idea. You could pick and choose all the different squares and put your own blanket together. I was really gung-ho, and I pulled out quite a few yarns, got all these plans. I made 2 squares and then completely lost steam on it, set those aside. It was a little bit of a pain, and the squares were really stiff. I chose to do tapestry crochet. And so tapestry crochet, you're actually enclosing the color that you're not using inside the other color you are using. So it's double or triple thick. And it was just super stiff in the yarn that I was using because I was doing all acrylic. So I wasn't super happy with them. And so these 2 finished squares, I did the Tesla square and the Bunsen and Beaker square, because of course, those are some of my absolute favorite scientists. And they just sat. And I was looking at them one day and I decided, you know what? I'm not going to finish this blanket, but I could make this into a pillow. And so I did that. And this is the finished pillow. I gave it to a very sciencey person in my life at the time, and he was a big fan of it. He said it was great to sleep with, and maybe he still has it to this day, who knows. But I was thrilled. All I had to do was single crochet around the edges and put a pillow inside. Like, it was, I don't know, maybe a 30-minute project to finish everything. I even sewed a tag on it that said handmade by Megan. And yeah, it became a really nice birthday gift. And I was just excited to get those things out of my room and into use. I had done all that work so many years before. So I was happy that that finally had purpose in its existence. After that, I grabbed another thing that I felt kind of guilty about. Are you noticing a theme? All of these were projects that kind of haunted me in some way. Quite a few years ago, I can't remember what year, I won the Mochi Mochi Land video section of their photo contest that they do every year. And as that, with my prize, I got 3 Mochi Mochi Land kits to make some of her teeny tiny amigurumi. And it was all her newest ones, which happened to be food-themed dogs. And one of the kits that she gave me was the ice cream doggy. So it's this tiny poodle. This was made in fingering weight yarn, little cherry on top, and it has an ice cream cone, which the pattern tells you to sew this on, obviously, so that it stays looking like an ice cream cone. I was making a lot of the stop motion kind of stuff with her patterns at the time for the video contest. So I wanted to make sure they were in different pieces to be more versatile. So this is sort of like a blanket for my little doggy here, but I was just excited that I finally made this up. It's so cute. Like, who needs an ice cream cone poodle? Apparently I did. And I still do feel kind of guilty when I look at this because I have 2 other dog amigurumi kits that she sent me that I still haven't made. I have the hamburger dog and the wiener dog. So one day I will finally make those up, but at least I made this one. And so I felt like I did something with my winnings. So that was nice as well. In the background, while I was making all of these other things, I was also working on this project. So this is undoubtedly my oldest work in progress that I finished. The year after I learned to crochet, I decided I haven't made a granny square blanket or anything yet. I need to do that. That's like a rite of passage when you're learning how to crochet. And I had never done it. So I bought this yarn that I thought was really cute. I had a plan in my head and I was just gonna whip out all these granny squares. And I would be really gung-ho. I would make a whole stack. I'd make like 10 or 15 squares. And then I would just get so bored that I would set it aside, and I didn't touch it for years. So while I was in the process of getting divorced, I grabbed that project. Thankfully, I had kept it all together. and I just started cranking out granny squares. So this was going on in the background of all those other projects that I just showed you, but I made some blankets. Originally, when I planned this project, I did not have kids, and I was going to make a queen size blanket to fit my own bed. But I have kids now, and in this time I had kids. They were little and they loved blankies. So I decided instead of making one for me, I was going to make two smaller blankets for my daughters. I have twins. So this is Cascade Cherub yarn in the Sunripe colorway is the main color. And then I just used white that was in my stash. Most of this was Lion Brand Pound of Love in white, but I think I ran out of what I had and I had to use some other stuff out of my stash as well. So it's just acrylic white yarn, but this was just so time consuming. It took so long. I started this January 1st of 2013, and on my Ravelry page it says how I'm so excited. It'll be so great to start this year with a blanket project. Little did I know that I hate making blankets. They're just boring to me. I love them. I love the look of them, but I just don't like doing the exact same thing over and over and over and over again enough to make a blanket. So I did make two adorable little blankets, and my little girls loved them. They are still in the closet and they use them from time to time. But I was mostly, again, just excited that I finally finished this project. It had been taking up so much space in my room. I would see this yarn and these unfinished blankets, and I just felt guilty every time I saw it. So I think maybe you're noticing the theme here. Most all of these projects, it was just to alleviate guilt on my own part by finishing them. And so even though these aren't used every day now, they were. And so that was awesome at the time. But even if they weren't, even if I had made a blanket for myself and kept it mostly in the closet, at least it was a blanket. At least it was done. It was not just some squares and yarn sitting in a bag in my room making me feel bad. After I finished those blankets, I reached for another project that I kind of hadn't known what to do with at the time, and so I felt guilty. I just wanted to get them done, and that is the Jaywalker Socks. This is a pattern by Grumparina. It's a free pattern on Ravelry, and if you notice, this ridge is twisted, and that is not the pattern's fault. That is my fault. I changed the method of construction from how this was written, and I did not know what I was doing at the time. I started these in 2018 in February, and there are quite a few mistakes. This is definitely my first one, and there's like a weird jog there. Like I was just not very good at knitting this pattern. It had not really sunk in, but I was persevering, and so I picked these up and I made it work. I finished the first one, even though it has this awkward twist. And then the second one definitely came out much better. But I had these sit for 2 years while I worked up the gumption to give it a try and to just finish them. And I finally did. It took me until June of 2020, but I got them done. And the twisty one, I will say, it's kind of awkward. It does want to twist on your foot, but it's a perfectly wearable sock. I have worn them quite a bit since I finished them. So this is another pretty old work in progress that sat there and guilted me. I just decided I didn't want to make any other socks until I finished this pair. So I'm really glad I did. Also, this is Knit Picks Felici in the Jamboree colorway, which is so pretty. And then this is Cascade Heritage in the Italian Plum colorway. So I love the combination of the colors. It's one of those things that if anybody else was seeing these on my feet, they're never going to see the mistakes. So they do have mistakes, but at least they got finished. And so I felt really good. It gave me a nice boost at the time. They got done. So at the end of this time period, it was about a year where I just didn't want to start anything new that I hadn't previously planned and decided was going to work. But the very first one that I did actually pick the yarn, pick the pattern, and make it work was the Raina shawl. This I made again out of an older stashed yarn that I just loved, and I always wanted to make something out of, but I didn't, and so I felt guilty about it. This is Knit Pick Stroll hand painted in the Koi Pond colorway, And it's one of those that it is such bright, crazy colors. Just to look at it, it's not something that I would immediately think of as my color palette that I like to wear. But I love this thing. I love these colors. And so I make it work. I make outfits to wear this because it's just such a fun, bright thing. But I finished off my mental block to planning projects with this one. And I did have to troubleshoot it a bit because I wanted to use up all the yarn. And so I extended this border quite a bit to use it all up. I have a tendency to end up with like half a skein of yarn left after I make a shawl consistently. Like with every shawl I make, no matter who wrote the pattern and what kind of yarn I use, I don't know why that is, but it happens every time. So I problem solved on this. I made it work. And I ended up with something that I love. So this one technically wasn't a long-standing UFO, but it was an old stash yarn, and it was kind of the mark of transitioning back into being able to plan my own projects again. So this one counts in that time period, I think. So I'm sure that you've noticed the theme with all of those items that I made over about the year that I was in the process of getting divorced and then adjusting after being divorced. My brain just could not handle the extra guilt of these projects, even though it was self-acquired guilt. Like no one else was looking at those things and pointing at me and saying, you didn't finish this. How dare you? Right? These are things that I made myself feel guilty about every time I saw them in my room. And I know we all do that. We all have things, whether it's yarn we bought and the project didn't work out like we thought, and now all that yarn just sits there. And so we think about how much money we spent on that yarn every time we see it. Or a box full of old projects that we had high hopes for, and then something happened and we just couldn't make ourselves finish them. So we have a tendency to place this really big guilt on ourselves for all of these projects, even though this is not our job, most of us. There's no outside body telling us you must complete this, and this, or you are a failure. It's completely our own judgment that is making this happen. And so I always felt that way until they ended up saving me. I needed things to work on, and that pile of UFOs gave me something to work on. It gave me something to focus on when I had no control over the things that were going on in my personal life, and something to make me happy, give me that mental boost of the fact that I actually completed this and it's cute and everyone else thinks it's cute too. So you get that outside validation as well. Not that that's what we always aim for at all, but when you're feeling down, that can be a really good way to bring yourself up, even just a little bit. I hope that this makes sense in the way that I'm trying to bring this about. I think we all make ourselves feel so guilty when we don't finish something, but maybe the reason you're not finishing it is that it has a greater purpose later on down the line. Maybe you're going to come across a time in your life that you need something kind of mindless that you can just grab and work on, and it'll make you feel doubly good because not only did you finish something, but you finished something that you had felt guilty about. That's just like the ultimate win as far as how accomplishing something in your hobby can make you feel. So I hope that sharing this with you can help you look at your pile of UFOs and works in progress with a little more grace. Cut yourself some slack. Maybe there will be a day that you're going to reach for those things. If it's something that you absolutely know there's no way you're ever going to finish it or you have no desire to, then don't feel any guilt in letting those things go. Rip it out, reuse the yarn, or like the people who donated that blanket that I finished, just donate the whole project. Maybe someone like me will come along and decide that they want to finish it. So there's just so many different things that we need to think about when we look at that pile of guilty projects. I hope that this can help you to free yourself from the guilt of having works in progress and UFOs. Just know that that object gave you what you needed at the time that you were making it. And sometimes it's time to set it aside and wait for later or to just move on. So I hope that this is helpful. If you did like this video, please do give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to stick around and see what other things I make in the future. Who knows what other long-standing works in progress I will finally finish. But in the meantime, I hope that you can cut yourself some slack. Don't worry about your work in progress pile. It will eventually become something or not, but there's no reason to stress about it. Just let it be as it is. And I hope that if you are in a time when you need something to help you focus and not think about the problems in your life, that you can grab from your UFO pile and get something done. And until next time, happy crafting.